All right, there we are.
Yeah.
Are we live, or are people listening is a strong word, but
Yeah, I think so.
I'm tuned in. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm tuned in. I'm just in the library.
Sick.
all right,
Looks like we've got a decent turnout here.
do what we can do here.
Alice Iggy's calling me. Let's see if he wants to join. Yo.
The host is on mute. I'm thinking that Zoom may have whatever. Lucas, sounds like you got it under control.
Yeah, Iggy just eviscerated a deer on his way to somewhere in his car. So that's why he's calling me.
Snag that tail, dude. Get that belly too. I was watching a video, one of the many Kelly Gallup videos that all of you have likely watched. And he was talking about flesh, taking the belly patch out of deer that he would see on the side of the road. And, laughing about the troopers that would see that and just think like, what type of psychopath is just taking the stomachs out of these deer and leaving the rest of them. But, I see it.
I'm curious, what are the rules in Vermont when it comes to like harvesting parts from roadkill? Because I know in Pennsylvania a lot of that's illegal.
I'm in Tennessee.
Oh, gotcha.
But yeah, good. I actually reached out to a couple different people. Something that I'm not going to screw around with because there's a deer processor here that I get tails from.
Ah, gotcha.
And they're running through 20, 30 a day starting mid-November. So they sell, they salt the hides and sell them to people who are going to turn them into something for $5 a piece.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. And well, a lot, if there's gut shots or, things are just, sometimes there's some bad cuts, they'll throw hides away. And so I'll go when I'm getting tails, which if they're not putting them aside for me, can be a little gnarly, getting through barrels, stomachs and necks. So I'll, if I see hide scraps, I'll just take a utility knife and snag them. So, I'm getting, can't really see that. Probably, 15, 16 inch, like 16 by 6, 7. They're bigger than the Primo strips that you see in store. That's why good belly hair is tough to find, because that's it for one deer.
Yeah.
Lucas, you're going to have to, or one of you will have to bring me back from wherever I end up going. I'm talking about cutting up deer in barrels at this point. So,
Okay, cool.
Which I'll talk about for a long time.
All right.
Would you want, tying, on the river type stuff, fishing, casting.
Let's go with on the river stuff. What's your mojo been for the last few months of streamers and mousing, and like what's your schedule?
Sure. Yeah. Schedule's been a lot of it's related to flows. If we have low water just across the board, then it kind of makes my life a little easier because I don't have to do any type of gymnastics or around that release schedule. Because if we do have a release, largely speaking, I want to hit that. There are some exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
But throughout the summer, the South Holston sort of varies. The Watauga, because the upper portion has some rapids, they at least release some from 1 to 6 every day, and then on the weekends they'll release big water. It's 3,300 CFS versus the typical release is 1,700. So that I like to say that expands the killing field for the big fish. It spreads everything out, but when these tailwaters are low and they're seeing, if the other tailwater is not running, the Watauga is seeing 30, 40, 50 boats in one section. So that in that there most if not all of those boats are off by 3 or 4 p.m. So in the summer, the schedule is kind of, the ideal schedule is kind of kicking off around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, fishing streamers until we see risers, which again, the low water, summertime fish rising, spooky stuff is, you can sort of throw that out the window because the bugs have a bigger margin to escape when the water's up. So yes, there are bugs that come off during low water, but afternoons when that water is up and by the time it reaches mid-river, you'll get, sometimes it'll be off color too, and you'll get significant hatches, and it's because if the water weren't coming up, those hatches wouldn't happen. So we'll fish streamers until we see risers. Most of my guys want to, even if they're streamer nuts, and even if they're smallmouth musky guys, most of them are going to want to take some shots. And I say that because I'm telling them that they should. And after they get an eat or two, it's pretty much a no-brainer. You want to stop and
Yeah.
dry flies. It's just fun getting that visual eat. So streamers until dark, which will be about 10:30. And then, unless we're doing a specific mousing trip, at which point we'll start closer to 9 or so. But, finish it off with 2, 3, 4 hours of mousing.
Sick.
Yeah.
Are you watching barometric pressure during your floats at all? And how have you seen that influence it since you fish like the same stretch of river like all the time?
Yeah, now I fish different.
Or yeah.
Same river.
Same river. Yeah, that's kind of more.
Yeah. And I do, I get into I want to figure this thing out, or this section was feeling good, or even this section was just feeling horrible and what's going on. So I'm just going to hammer that for a week.
Yeah.
Pressure. Yeah, there's a lot going on with the barometer. I think something that is, I might actually write some things down so I don't start getting too crazy. But 2 things come to mind that are at least measurable. One of which is the surface tension on the water. So when you have lower pressure, lower atmospheric pressure pushing down on the water, that meniscus the reason that it hurts the belly flop, that's smack, the surface tension on the water. When you have lower pressure, lower atmospheric pressure, it's actually easier for bugs to come up and escape and get through that meniscus. So, I talk about bugs a lot because it's a good indicator. Same thing with minnows and saltwater, bait balls, that type of thing. Bugs bring out fish that eat bugs, and fish that eat bugs bring out the other fish, or at least it gets the system going. You see more herons, you see more ospreys. So that's one thing. The other one is cloud cover, and that for how I fish and the fish that I fish for typically, and I'm going to refer to brown trout and striper, I think almost exclusively through this, unless I say otherwise. They're tailwater fish, and what that means relative to freestones is that the flows, the temperature, the clarity, very importantly, is the same. It's people come and fish this, and it looks almost foreign. It looks like the Caribbean. It's clear. It's from a distance. When you start seeing depth, it's turquoise. And when you get up over 10 foot pool, you can see big fish sitting down there. They can see you. The herons and the ospreys, with golden eagles, a whole mess of boats. These fish, the bigger ones, you hear it all the time. They don't get big from being stupid or from being caught. So they're going to be so much less willing to come out and eat something if it means getting snagged by an osprey, and they can also see stuff that's coming above them. So low pressure typically corresponds to a system moving in. Now, I want to give a good example of that working, and then an example of everything being wrong condition wise, and still some cool stuff happening. So with it working, Lucas, this is actually Corey, a guy who I didn't know very well, but he tied for the same shop that I tied for back in DC, and we finally got to fish together. He was out here, and he boated a 26, just this giant creek, Palm Creek fish. There's the lake runs that come up the lower end, but big fish, really high in the river, where people kind of expect to see more smaller fish in the tailwater. The picture, in the picture, it's very sunny. And I remember as we were dropping in, the water was coming up. We're dropping in this first run where he got that fish. It was black. There's some mountains that are behind the top of tailwater, and there were black clouds coming in. And so that barometer is just plummeting. And we got the water coming up, and it was the big water. So a couple good things happening at the same time. Corey's cast, I was standing up, like talking in someone's backswing in golf. I was standing up, hitting him on the back, because we'd gone over stuff for about 30, 45 minutes. And he's a good angler, but it's just, my program is a little different. And he was just executing so perfectly. He had, a couple casts in, and then he was going for another one, and he stopped and let his fall back behind him, because had he gone for this spot that was pretty good, but marginal, all of it looks perfect. Had he gone for that one, he's not going to be able to get to the next one. So in his back cast, he saw the next one, dropped his fly, waited, and then delivered it and perfectly, and ended up getting that fish. So I don't think that fish happens without all of those things: the water, the barometer, that cast from Corey, and his retrieve. I mean, probably 40 feet.
Yeah.
It was probably a 50-foot cast, and it ate at about 40, so 10 feet from the boat, or 10 feet from his rod tip, 20 feet from the boat. So that type of behavior, 26 is an outlier, but that type of behavior that's a pattern that I won't accept an argument from at this stage, because of the bitiness that I see when there is cloud cover. And again, that cloud cover typically corresponds to a low pressure system moving in. I did have a fish that was maybe a little longer, but yeah, 26, 27, no cloud, bluebird day, 8:30 in the morning. And the guy had just missed a 20, I don't know, above 20 big fish. Came off, juicy little section. 2 or 3 casts later, I just hear, there she is, and this creepy good strip set. That big fish ate. So the fact that he got 2, and then we saw some other stuff throughout the day that was just abnormal. And bluebird, I mean, 0 clouds, the barometer wasn't doing anything. So so do I look at the barometer while fishing? No. Once I'm out, that's it. It is interesting to sort of note that, and for purposes of planning, if you have a day, let's say you're looking at your week, and Tuesday, or let's just say it's the difference between Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. I'm going to travel back in time to having a normal job. You can get out Friday afternoon in the summer, right, from 4 to 10. Or you can go out Sunday morning. Sunday morning is after it rained all night and it's just socked in. It's going to be 95% cloud cover, and it's going to rain for the next 2 days. And Friday is kind of sunny, maybe partly cloudy. Plan to go on Sunday morning. I mean, that at this stage, that's a no-brainer for me. If it's up to, or if you only have certain days that you can fish and you're able to schedule around weather, fish around weather 100% of the time. It makes streamers and bugs to a certain degree, but certainly for big streamers, fish around weather. And again, I think the fish can feel it. I think it brings the bugs, all that other stuff. But, the cloud cover is also a significant contributor to that bitiness. And then the freestone stuff, that can bring in some extra rain and drop the clarity, and that's a good thing.
Cool.
So there's a lot of reasons that low pressure just outside of the barometer reading can provide some pretty good fishing.
Ellis, what have you excuse me, what have you found to be like, or what do you use for like a weather resource, like online?
Yeah. NOAA, NOAA.
Yep.
If you just look up, you can actually just look up your zip code of your city, and there's a good.
If you just like search like barometric pressure and like the first one that pops up, do you use that one? Where it's like you put in your zip code?
So I actually have there's an app for migraines called Weather X,
Okay.
and it gives a little forecast. I'm going to try to, this might not work at all, but I'm still going to try. So this
Gotcha.
is the NOAA hourly forecast. And what I have showing there is wind speed and temperature, and then there's cloud cover and some rain percentage, but that blue line is the cloud cover on an hourly forecast. So that's one that I really like to use again with guiding and with trips, or if sometimes I just need to go out, it doesn't matter what the conditions are. Yeah, it's just there's no reason to look at anything at that point. But for the purposes of, should I be going out now or in 4 hours, or today versus 2 days from now, that NOAA site's pretty good. And then Weather X, this is super. It's a forecast, just like everything, but it is cool that they sell earplugs for migraines. And so the deal is that backwards?
Yeah. No, you're good.
Okay. So this is telling me to wear my earplugs because there's an incoming shift. This is telling me, since the incoming shift is increasing pressure, that I don't feel bad for not fishing today, even though it was nice and cloudy. It was also cold, and I'm not used to the cold quite yet. The next piece, tomorrow morning, they go in increments of 0.03. So again, it's a forecast, it's directional, but the 0.12, like the 0.18, it is 38 degrees here. And yesterday, it was like mid 50s, the day before, 65. So the 0.18 corresponds to 20-mile-an-hour winds and a drop in temperature, zero humidity. It's a big deal. So I see 0.12 tomorrow, and I'm probably going to just end up tying until I panic and only am able to fish for 2 hours. But I'm probably going to make it a point to go out and get those 2 hours in tomorrow morning. So yeah, again, that's Weather X.
I'm a little off topic, but when it comes to river discharge and whatnot, like what when it comes to like deciding, I guess, like what you're gonna fish that day, or even if you're gonna bother going out that day, like how much of a factor is that, like USGS and whatnot?
Freestones or tailwater?
We'll say tailwater because we're at UVM. We're right next to the Winooski, so we have the dam right there that I've been going down to a little bit.
So
Alice, stick to freestones. The Winooski, by the way, is like not exactly the same sort of tailwater Ellis is talking about.
Okay.
It for him, if you look up what the South Holston and the Watauga rivers in Northeast Tennessee look like, they're not. You can't.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
It's
a completely different deal.
I think I'm still probably going to answer your question though.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm looking up Newski. All right, I'll do that later. More water, to the extent that your presentation can get to your target,
Mm-hmm.
more water is better.
Okay.
So that first qualifier is pretty important, because if
Yeah.
it's ripping, you're not going to be able to get it to your target. Now, that said, if you have some big pools, like there are some sections in a couple parts of the lower South Holston and both the upper and kind of lower third of the Watauga, where you could sink a car in low water in the non-release stage, and
Mm-hmm.
you probably wouldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So to get a fly presented to whatever monsters are lurking down there, you even in low water, you can't do it.
Yeah.
That awful condition day with so much bitiness there were a couple things going on, but one of which we were fishing in low water.
Mm.
So there are these sections that, it's still ripping. There's still these giant cut banks, and they're undercut by cliff and all this stuff. And to get a fly, especially, I mean, even a lure, but to get a fly up under that cliff, up under those cut banks when it's pushing water, no
Mhm.
chance.
Yeah.
Absolutely no chance. And those fish they're not going to come out into that. It's all about maximizing input, minimizing output.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I harp on is proximity to the bank, so much more so than your fly choice.
Yeah.
You need to have it near face.
Mhm.
Now, this is where I can start to make things up, because I don't know this. But sure, maybe bigger flies can entice them to come out if that cast isn't as perfect. But you don't need to fish monster flies. You need to get it close. I mean, they need to be big enough to make them eat. But you don't need to be fishing monster flies. You need to
Yeah.
be getting that thing tight to. I don't fish two flies. You need to get that thing tight to the bank.
Mhm.
And so that's where the the more water is good rule is incorrect when when you can't get it there.
Mhm. Yeah.
That said, lower water in some of the places that I'm thinking of, some of these runs that look like a pretty good moving river, there's a little loss of clarity with that high water, and low water that it's kind of lakey,
Mhm.
and there's not enough disruption around
Yeah.
to make them feel comfortable coming out of wherever they're hiding. And then freestones for sure, high water, and you can
Mhm.
look up. There's you say you're in Pennsylvania?
Um. From Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was Joe Humphreys. It could be Brooks. Um,
I think Humphrey is. I think he's from PA. Yeah.
yeah, and he taught it at Penn State. He's got a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah.
But there was something I read years ago, and it was just the term high water event is what stuck out to me in this article. And I think he had, I don't know if it was recorded, but the mythical state or some record, and it was a high water event that
Mhm.
fishing, and some of those, I think it was Penn's or Fishing Creek. When those freestones blow out, when it's high water, it's blown. It's chocolate milk.
Yeah.
Um, I fished Yellow Breeches a good deal, about hour 45, and I tooled around in all those creeks up there. But I started seeking out those conditions, and found that I couldn't get, wade fishing with streamers. I couldn't get casts that made any amount of sense. Because even if you can get the fly there, you got to have your rod tip down in the water and start retrieving. So around that time, I started fishing. I was fishing a fast action 6 weight, and I was putting 7 weight, 7-inch per second full sink line, just to get that thing. Even though it was close quarters, I wanted to get that thing down as quickly as possible. And when it's blown like that, it's tough to do. So this is, I don't know if it was Kelly Gallup or maybe it was Josh Varner talking about it, but the Peanut Envy, Marabou.
What was it called again?
Peanut Envy.
Oh, okay.
And I've watched these Kelly Gallup videos. I wanted to look up my YouTube history, but it didn't give me the per video time. But basically an articulated woolly bugger.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And called the Peanut Envy because the platform is from Russ Madden. This is kind of a crap fur type deal. But that's dumbbell eyes. And if you haven't seen Russ Madden stuff, he's got a lot of great variations of just the quote unquote simple platform. But I wasn't there, but he was one of, if not the first guy to articulate flies. And I always like to give him credit where credit's due whenever I talk about Kelly's version, which it's slender, it sinks faster. I put tungsten cones on them, and this is accidental because the front hook was snapped off. But fishing yellow breeches in high water, I started snapping the front hook off and tying the tungsten cone on a jig hook.
Okay.
With this one, with no hook on it, so it didn't want to turn. So it didn't want to turn over. And then this guy just flopping around in the back on a small enough hook to where it would be held up by that jigging, with that head sitting down here, not snagging. Because I'd be downstream, I'd cast it up into where you would throw nymphs, up into the white water of pretty muddy run riffle pools, up into the white water, and then almost high stick it, work it back and give it some switches as it was sinking down. And a handful of days getting, the 14 to 16 inch trout on some of those freestones. Those are the 2-footers here.
Yeah.
To get some of those 14, 16 inch browns on those Pennsylvania freestones, I can count on 2 hands probably after thousands of hours wade fishing all of those. Just they don't really. I know there's some freaks in there, but even those 16 inchers, you feel pretty happy about. So,
Ellis, not to cut you off on the topic or anything.
You're not, man.
Just as you're kind of talking about streamer fishing here, just for maybe the folks on here, would you mind going over let's say your theory on how to entice those upper, very high top tier class brown trout into eating a streamer? What are you trying to do with your fly? Just for some people on here, for reference, here kind of close to us ish within a few hours, we have some pretty good big trout populations.
Sure.
But yeah, just maybe your theory on moving and or enticing those like really big fish into eating a fly?
Yeah, so I want to immediately be careful and walk back one of your qualifiers there. What we're fishing to, the types of fish we're fishing to with streamers, and in particular when we're fishing to structure, we're fishing to the bank, or middle of the river, the pocket water type stuff. Some of the stuff in those Pennsylvania fisheries, like there are some big fish hanging out behind boulders and all that stuff. These tailwaters, there's almost cliffs that come out of the middle of the river. So we're fishing to structure, and we don't know if it's going to be an 11-inch trout or a 20-something inch trout. It's not fishing to big fish. It's fishing to, when I say predator fish, it's fish that are going to eat a streamer. We're not floating bobbers and fishing to fish that see a little fly and decide that it's worth the gamble to go up and eat that little fly. We're fishing to fish that are holding in places that those fish are not. So, the banks, and you can't target. Is everything okay?
Very passionate roommates.
Okay. So yeah, just to qualify that, the number of fish, the number of big brown trout in those places that you cannot target with bugs, you can't entice them out with bugs, relative to the number of big fish holding in, I'll call them rainbow trouty type zones. Yes, that ratio is higher for sure. So that said, the way that I like to get eats, and this does go for the big fish. I steal, borrow. I use a lot of what I employ today is it's kind of my own style of just amassing all this information that some awesome guides and tires have made publicly available. 3 of which are Tommy Lynch, Blaine Chocolate, and Kelly Gallup. There's a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other people, so many different videos, books that have gone into what I do. But those 3 in particular, Tommy has been pretty critical in the development of how I approach fishing. I think Kelly, as he does with so many people, gets folks going towards the right path. The way Tommy's brain works is very, very interesting. And when you fish the drunken disorderly, and when you fish it correctly, when it's tied correctly, when you fish it correctly, it speaks to his experience. It speaks to the thought that goes into that fly. And the God knows how many different iterations of that fly existed before it became that fly. You say something like that to him, and I said something like that. He's crediting, Dahlberg is the one who started stacking and packing deer hair for a purpose, and carving it for a purpose, and stacking and packing with the carving in mind. So this is all important context for how I move flies, because when you watch the drunken disorderly, and the best way to watch it and to learn how to swim that fly is, and it's not stripping, it's not just, oh, this looks good. When you start moving that thing in a way that it is meant to be moved and how Tommy designed it, and it's a fly that's tied correctly, it is shocking. And what happens is every time it moves, it goes back and forth, but it also goes down. And a big part of why I tie with deer hair so much is, and again, this is, I don't know if this is Tommy's phrase originally, but something I had heard from him. It's, the Rapalas, one of my favorite lures, it's balsa. When it's in the water, it hates being in the water. So anytime you give it a movement, it wants to go back to wherever it was, and it wants to go up. So when it goes down, it wants to come back up immediately. So the drunken disorderly, to have that thing with enough buoyancy on the deer hair head to give that float recovery, that's the term that I'm stealing. That allows it to, you're fishing it as it dives down, it wants to come back up. It's going left and right as it tips with flanks that are encompassing the flash and rabbit around that flash, and like this. As you go down, that rabbit is covering. As it floats, as it wants to come back up, that rabbit, which is heavy and retains water, moves, and you get this exposure of that flash. And when you start walking it like that, and you get that movement right on the bank, and you use, these are the strips. You would talk about wrist, and especially the mini, and especially in current. I mean, sometimes like in current, you're talking about fingers. You're not even talking about wrist. This is fishing in fast water in the river from the bank. That's all you're doing. This is not right. It's not going to do it. So what that does is it creates and I saw this saltwater fishing too, when you're getting close to snook that are right on the beach. And if you move it out, they're not going to eat it. They're hanging on the beach. They're doing their one thing. You want to maximize the amount of movement and minimize the space, minimize the distance from that fish. So if you're doing that with, I think another Tommy phrase, the strip flies, which, Dungeon, the Peanut Envy, Russ's stuff, a lot of these great streamers, absolutely you're going to catch great fish with the deer hair type flies. And really it's the drunken and fly that a couple iterations away from, but different enough to call my fly the swim bug. With those two things, you can get, 4 or 5 different strips and kills in a really short amount of space. And, that's the super long answer is baked into what I just said. The short version of that is to entice and eat. I want to move it very, very quickly while I'm also stopping it as much as possible and reducing the distance from would-be predator, bank, structure, reducing that distance as much as possible. So that cadence it's very short, fast strips with really pronounced kills. So it's not pulling line. You're with the weighted line. You're throwing it. You're just giving these little, and in between that kill, in between that silence in between is when it Lucas. You're happy with it. It looks good. that kill in between, that's when the drunk is coming back up. The swim bug's going sideways. Blaine's this swim bug it's really there's a number of different things behind it, but it's taking stuff that I learned and saw from tying Blaine's T-bone and what I learned and saw from tying and fishing the drunken disorderly. And it's kind of mashing those two things together. So when that thing kicks sideways, which you can get it to do very quickly, and you can get it to do 3 or 4 times over the course of 2, 3, 4 feet. Every time you give it that kill, very fast strips. Nothing in nature moves slow. None of this. It's not moving at the speed of your hand. It's throwing that line as fast as possible and then not moving it. So the big change that I make when that's not enticing is varying the kill duration, sometimes the cadence. So instead of strip, strip, kill, strip, strip, kill, strip, strip, kill, you want strip, strip, kill, strip, strip, kill, strip, 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 kill. And if that, you start working that, and if that's not doing anything, you lay your cast out, splat. You're tight on the line. Maybe just strip a little line in to keep it tight, but it's splat. Strip, strip. Strip, strip. So it's not always this. I love getting that thing on the bank and just moving it as fast as possible, two-handing it. That's not always the answer, and in fact, rarely going to be, what sells it. So changing up that kill cadence for sure is something that I employ, and I think that's the real answer to how I entice fish to eat, and we can use the term big fish, because that's the goal for streamer fishing sometimes. But how I entice them is finding out what type of kill they want to eat. Sometimes it's a jig, it's a lower profile on a jig, but it's still, when I'm tying weighted flies, I'm doing it in a way that my dungeons are they're not packed at all. If I want a packed bug, I'm going to fish a hair bug. They're really sparse. And so I'm using that deer hair to displace water up front, but those lead eyes, I'm still getting this. I don't want to lose that. I don't just want to pull something through the water. So it's really, it's playing around with, let's say, half dozen of your confidence patterns and seeing what configuration of depth and retrieve cadences will start to get it done.
What about when you're getting a follow and like
Faster, 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 faster.
cool? What about
If
like
you're-
experience with like other species other than brown trout, say like muskie pike?
So with muskie, I just my N is not high enough to to speak intelligently about it. So I would encourage people to, with brown trout, I'm talking closing in on 1,000 days, fishing the same 2 rivers, but taking a lot of, taking hundreds and hundreds of other days wade fishing, different types of rivers, and just with muskie over the course of 3 or 4 years and a couple different waterways, not having nearly as many fish in the boat or even follows. I would encourage people to, Blaine's book actually game changer. There's a lot of good information in there about fishing and about guiding and casting and retrieving that I would strongly encourage people to buy that book. And he's a guide, and so to support that that aspect, I'm going to throw in one thing that I have seen make a difference with the follows and commitment on the 8. There's a video that, and if you guys can remind me about some of the stuff that I'm talking about, I'll try to find some of them. There's a video from Larry Dahlberg where he has an underwater mic, and the video is about the whopper plopper, which if you just look up whopper plopper muskie eats, it's awesome. But he and Chris Wellen fishing up in Wisconsin, just smacking fish with that thing. But they were going with the other underwater camera, just recording the noise that the whopper plopper puts out during the retrieve. And it's bizarre, and it's so loud underwater relative to spinnerbaits, chatterbaits. And then he throws out a big musky fly, what Lucas has right there, just a big old thing of bucktail and flash, and he's moving it through the water. And I mean, relative to the gear, especially the whopper plopper and some of the stuff with big rattles, you can't hear it. Nothing's happening. You just see this thing moving. He's got 4 rod tips in the water, so you can kind of hear line moving through the rod tips, but it's just not, that thing out there is not making noise. Then he gets it half a rod length from the tip, maybe a little closer, and starts moving it with his rod in the figure 8, and it is loud as, I'm going to try to not swear. It's real loud. It's louder than the whopper plopper. It's louder than any rattle. I mean, when you get that fly close to the boat, that noise, I had to follow. This was in the spring, where it was a juicy place. Got the fly in. I was retrieving it. Water was pretty cold, so I was moving it pretty slowly. And I ran up on I was in my drift boat. I ran up on a submerged log. And it was an acute enough piece of the log to make a pretty significant noise. And it's an aluminum boat, so shit was loud. When I hit that thing, the muskie came out from its hidey hole, and my boat was kind of stuck but moving still a little bit, and it was following on the 8, and my boat moved, and it moved over the fish. And hard to say that spooked it, because they really don't get spooky when they're committed, but I don't think the fly brought it out. I don't think it would have come out if I didn't hit that log, get that commotion going in the water. So yeah, there's people say that you should figure 8 on every retrieve. I've fished with some great guides that don't necessarily disagree, but they don't push that. And to fish as though there's a fish following on every retrieve at every point in that retrieve, absolutely, that's the right thing to do. But you also need to be fishing a lot of water when you're muskie fishing. So if you are getting a follow, then you know, in my limited experience, it's continuing to do what you're doing. And when you get it to the boat, start moving it wide circles. You don't ever want it to have it, you know, coming across. You want to be going wide. To have the wherewithal to turn, to position yourself to be able to turn the rod tip and set into them, pretty cool. But I don't think you should be held accountable for any actions after boat side eat.
How how accurate do you think a rattle is imitating the vibration of a bait fish versus the head shape on a fly?
Two different questions. Not to I will interpret that as two different questions. And I'll rephrase one of them. I'm tearing this apart with a red pen. Not to be disparaging about that. But I don't put rattles and flies to imitate a bait fish noise at all. I put them in as, you know, dinner bells, door knockers. You just to wake them up. If I can get away with putting a rattle in, I'm putting a rattle in. End of story there. Now, when I say get away with, I do mean, is this rattle going to impact something that overrides what I feel is the positive influence of that rattle? So with smaller dungeons, when you put a rattle in, you're wrapping stuff over it, and relative to your dungeons that don't have rattles, if you're wrapping chenille over that thing, then you got marabou coming over that, you can feel it on the cast. And I know a lot of the stuff for guys in my boat that, you know, they don't feel the difference between one to the next. Some of them do though, and I've had one guy go, "Where's that other dungeon I was fishing?" And, you know, I had given him one with some UV chenille on it with a little rattle up front and no dice. He was like, where's the other one? It was sparser. It was kind of chewed up and sort of yellow. And that was the fly you wanted. You can also feel it on the cast. There's so much more weight when you do put a rattle in. So in that instance, it's the swim of the fly itself trumped the rattle. And this goes with so much fishing and so much guiding. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what the actual impact of a rattle is. If that dude on the front of my boat, who's the one putting the fly near would-be fish, we're going to eat it. If he's happier with one thing over another, that's the fly we're going to fish. I don't care what it is. So the rattle can do the same thing. It can, you know, they'll pick it up and do this, and all of a sudden those next couple casts have some gas on them, and that's all you need. That can last for typically more than a couple casts. I have seen, you know, my opinion is that rattles influence bites. So if you can get away with it, if you can keep everything as comfy and as, you know, properly swimmy as possible, and get a rattle inside of it, then, you know, go for it.
Just a quick question.
Go for it.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off if you had something else to say.
No, not at all. I'm going to keep talking. If no one interrupts me, I told Lucas to hire someone locally with a trank gun to sneak in here and just put me down here pretty soon. So go for it.
Just curious, on the topic of guiding and somebody being in your boat, maybe having confidence flies, or maybe you having confidence in a certain fly on a given day. Right off the bat, like I love fishing dungeons, I love fishing peanut envies, I love fishing your swim bug, but like I know I have my own system for when I fish any of those flies, but what decisions lead you to hand one of those flies or others, like a D&D or whatever it may be, to somebody in your boat and have confidence in the fact that that's the fly that they should be starting with right off the bat in your boat?
Great question. And for your own, to answer Ollie and using your own experience, it's going to be the same thing you do.
Yeah.
Nothing different. There are days where I think one thing or another. There are clients where it's different. So, you know, I've been given a hard time on more than one occasion for, you know, tying a fly on and then, you know, kind of having two or three and just being like, let me know if you want to change. It's like, just, you know, a guy last week, oh God, I'm losing time, 2 or 3 weeks ago, saltwater guide and one of the fishiest, troutiest anglers I've ever seen. He fished, this is the reason why I have so many of the tan grizzly. And yeah, not surprisingly, this is just lead eyes, really not much flash, which is sort of opposite to a lot of the ones that I like to fish with the UV chenille. That head isn't trimmed, but chronic flash in the back. He fished, I have 2 of these in my car that don't have hooks on them. He fished these really muted taupe. I mean, you see it in the water. It's got some of this Michael's two-tone craft fur, but it's like kind of a polar fiber. I don't know. It's not. It swims great, and dude, this was just it for him. It had been it for a couple different clients, and you know, he tied it on. It was pulling teeth. We caught some fish, and you know, connected with a few others, and we got to sort of a midday lull, and the dude runs 250 through. I mean, he runs charters in Florida so much. And so he gets it. He understands what the deal is. So that midday lull, he's not out here trying to, a lot of the times I'm just like, let's fish something else to sort of, you know, get some, I don't know. For me, it's like creativity. There's like, we got all these flies, you know, let's see if you like swimming something or how this casts, because clearly the bite has gone to shit. So that one in particular, I think we went through 4, and he didn't lose any. He just kept snapping. You know, you get it sort of hung up and rip it through, and snap the front and back hooks off of 2 and took the back hooks off of another 2. For experienced anglers, if I have 2 in the boat, I'm going olive peanut envy for one of them and white dungeon for the other one. And whoever starts, if they're both casting well, and better believe I got my eyes on you. If they're both casting well and retrieving well and, you know, doing the right stuff, that should be getting eats, you know, based on that run or where I've seen fish coming from recently. If they're doing all the right stuff and one of them, you know, let's say there's 4 or 5 chases on this dude with the UV chenille, and nothing on the white. Maybe the guy's feeling the white. If someone's feeling something, I'm not going to push him too hard, but I might get him to try to go to something that is a little darker, sort of same profile, but maybe also sinkier to get closer to this. And then if this is not getting commitment, I'm gonna change flash content. So I have a bunch of peanuts that have the UV polar chenille and don't have the UV polar chenille. I think I'd probably catch just as many fish, if not more, if I just kept fishing the same fly, if getting follows. But I do think that changing up how loud it is can convert some of those follows to eats.
Absolutely. So you're giving both of those clients like pretty natural or like at least smaller profile flies, and maybe not starting off with like a swim bug. But like I know me and Lucas, and I'm sure everyone else who's fished swim bugs, like you get some like 11-inch fish, you eat them that are like pretty much the same size as the fly. What what factors come into play where you do have confidence to like hand those flies to people or fish them yourself that are different than fishing something that's just like I fish dungeons and like pretty gin clear water sometimes and move a lot
Yeah.
of, but I might not necessarily throw a swim bug in that water with confidence.
Sure.
Is that kind of just like what you're going with too? Like if you've got a pretty rowdy day on the river, that's when you want to make a lot of noise with something like that? Or what makes you say, "Oh, I'm gonna switch to like a drunken disorderly or a swim bug and have a bigger splash?"
Yeah. Also, great question. That fly can't. I mean, that fly won't ever be something that I say we shouldn't be fishing. What I want to see kind of first, and not necessarily like it's a tryout, but same with the drunken disorderly. You know, the swim bug, it goes for that too. You have to fish it, and you have to fish it intentionally, and you have to cast it well, and it's just the deer hair bugs are a little higher maintenance. You have to put thought into them and how you're fishing them, and when you see what's happening, that you can lose some of the intentional thought because you start getting, you know, that it quickly becomes muscle memory to get it to do what it just did. It's really easy on that next cast, and then next time you go out and you slap that thing in the water, conditions are completely opposite, and you get it doing what it does. It's easier to do, and it feels like you're going to get a fish to eat. So when I'm fishing on my own, I mean, this was just 2 days ago. I was out, not super bitey, but goddamn, that the swim bug was just, it was looking so good. You know, like they all have some different action. You know, I'm not a robot. But so this one in particular is just like it looked so good. And a big fish came out and wrecked it right off of a um, little clump of grass in a place that it's always a likely spot, but it's not my confidence spot. But I switched. You know, I was fishing some of these tan jobbers and figuring, playing with some different flash content and just experimenting. So with guys fishing the swim bug, it really, I'll throw it in throughout the day. You know, if we've gotten an eat or two and they're casting well, and then things kind of slow down, I'll be like, you know, let me know, you know, we can do something a little bigger, you know, not crazy. And I've seen this now enough times to be happy and completely content, no confidence, you know, no harm in my ego when people fish it, and I can tell. You know, I'm not going to preface it with, "Oh, this is my fly" and all that stuff. They'll fish it, and it's just like, yeah, I can tell it's not working for them. Some people like things a little lower in the water column. That's fine. Other people, I've had enough experiences where they have fished it, and I hesitate to say that, you know, it crosses up their wires as much as it can do to the trout, but it really, I've seen it have the impact of just someone watching it while they're fishing it. And it, like that part, I've heard Tommy talk about it, you know, making people eat food and pulling them out of the boat when it's 30 degrees and they're fishing steelhead. And I mean, short of taking a crowbar out and pulling these people out of the boat, because you're swimming the thing and it's just like, okay, when is it going to happen? It's not, are we going to get an eat? It's, when is this thing going to get wrecked? Because clearly, just watching it, it's going to happen. So when I see that happen, it kind of turns into, you know, whatever confidence patterns have been or were for that day or the other client, that person should be fishing the swim bug. And I had a guy who he's almost 70, and he had that, what, like this fly, it, you know, getting it to the boat and sort of like moving it, just looking at it in the water, and then pop, pop, pop. And he got to fishing it pretty good. It got to be dark enough to where, you know, we were fishing dry flies, and I was like, you know, we were fishing lures. You can try to look at a bobber if you feel like it, or, you know, cast streamers and try to get him as close to the bank as possible. We went with the streamers, and you can hear it. When I think I sound like a fucking maniac. But you can hear the strip cadence, and you can hear that confidence in guys. And we put that thing on. I know he couldn't see it, and his casting, his strip cadence did not change from earlier in the day. And he had never caught a big trout on. He had never caught a trout on a streamer before, not to mention a big one. And we had I back rode probably 40 or 50 feet to get the fly out of a log. And I kept telling him to stop moving his rod. He was like, I'm not. And it's like, okay. Big fat brown trout had eaten his fly, and he thought it was stuck in a log. So he's at that point, he's just going on memory from earlier in the day. So if guys can do that with a Crelex or a Clouser or a Game Changer, we should be fishing that fly. But yes, super long version of, I'm starting with those two, this tan guy's in the mix now.
But if you're fishing, you're just like, if you are fishing for your
Sure.
own purposes, like it sounds to me like you're starting with, like, clearly you like the action of the swim bug, you designed
Yeah.
it. So, like, you're starting with that fly, and then if things get slow, you're moving to those more natural options that you give clients right off the bat all the time?
It depends. 2 days ago, I just wanted to get some fish to eat a fly on the end of my line. And my first choice is the darker olive peanut envy with a healthy amount of flash.
And just another thing I wanted to know, like, what your thoughts were on it, with like fishing those two different kinds of fly, or categories of fly, between like the weighted peanut envies and dungeons, or the like big flashier swim bugs and drunken disorderlies and flies like that. Do you think that you notice a huge difference in the class of fish that's eating, either for you or your clients? Or do you think that it's more of a confidence thing and reading the conditions, and that's why you're throwing them, not to seek out a certain class of fish that's going to eat those flies respectively?
Yeah, you're on fire. So I got a bunch of flies here. So the swim bug versus the, let's do swim bug and peanut envy. So swim bug, which your 11-inch, there are plenty of jokes within this, but your 11-inch might be in a client's 11-inch. So it's swim bug. This one's coming in at, it's about 6. That's about right. So 5.5, 6. But yeah, when an 11-inch trout, which are not, they're not super stocky. When an 11-inch trout eats this thing and it's kind of a skinny creek brown trout, it's like a smallmouth eating a musky fly. It's like, dude, well done. So this is, to me, not enough to say I'm just targeting big fish. I typically don't want to do that unless it's because I want to fish something. This crafty changer, not much flash. I made it in low water in the winter last year. Is super clear. Is to sort of middle that and say, I want to be able to entice a big fish, but it like a 20. I want a 26 to be able to eat this and not be completely stupid. I wanted to him or her to have a good target. But if a 15 or 16, which again, that's still a big brown trout, everyone. If a 15 or 16 wants to eat this, absolutely. And then on super bitey days where you can't keep the 10 to 12 inches off. Yeah, I want them to eat it too. So getting in that 4 to 5 inch range is pretty healthy. That the swim bug kind of is a little longer, but it's not as much mass to cast. That's a different conversation. The class of fish that you're fishing to, I think, is only limited when you go up in size. I don't think that fishing small flies, given the correct circumstances, I don't think fishing small flies is going to limit your ceiling on the size of fish. I do think that fishing big flies, I think that limits, at that stage, you are really just going for big fish. Now, with brown trout in particular, I have seen with the hair bugs, with that action, the eats and the commitment, you can't compare it to the dungeon and peanut type eats. I will say that as a big fish catching fly, the dungeon, because you can tie it in 4 or 5 inches, that deer hair, when you're casting a 4 or 5 inch peanut envy with a cone head, you have to open your loop up, and it's just not fun to cast. The deer hair and the fat collar on a dungeon, sure, that does a lot of good stuff for the swimming on it, but next time you're out, change your leader, whatever you're fishing, make it a foot of 20 or a foot of 30 and 3 feet of 20 and 3 feet of 15. Like that's a pretty long leader. Throw a peanut envy, 15, 20 times, and then put on a dungeon. That dungeon is going to unfold. And because it has air, you're casting a fly at that point, it has air resistance and it feels nice to cast. And you can get that loop tight and get it under bad spots, and you're not side arming and doing these big rainbow casts. So I think one of the big reasons that the dungeon catches so many good big fish is that it can put out a big enough profile in that 4 or 5 inch category, and it feels fun to cast. So people are more willing to get it out there. And it's easier to fish. It's lower maintenance to fish. The swim bug, that's like one of my pride and joys within that fly, is that you can put it across the river with a loop that's tighter than fishing dry flies, and it turns over, whack, it lands true every single time, splats, sinks immediately with the sinking line. So the eats that you're getting on the drunks and the hair bugs in between, or in the swim bugs, in those kills, it's just 100% commitment. There's none of this little, they're coming out and swiping at it type thing. They're either getting, they're getting it middle of the fly with that back hook in its mouth, or in the corner of the mouth, because they're trying to eat it in the middle, or they're missing it, which is a wild thing to see. But yeah, I do think that they're the side to side, up down, that hair bug type kill is, you're going to be able to entice a bigger fish who's more concerned for its livelihood. You're going to be able to get that one to eat more often than you would with just a strip fly. And it's simply because you can get 4 or 5 different strip kills, because every time it kills, it stops moving. So you can get all of that movement in a short window. But to get that type of movement on a dungeon, you have to strip it 4 or 5 times, and it's moving 3 or 4 times the distance. So to summarize, big flies, and I'll show you the 5 to qualify. When you get up to like the 7 inch changers, 7, 8 inches, that's when
Hey, Alice, we can't really hear you when you're talking down there. You're probably gonna have to repeat that.
when you get up to the 7 inch changers, like the 5, 6 inch swim bugs, I'm getting 10 inch brown trout eating those. I'm also my 3 biggest fish, just under 30, 28 and 27, all on swim bugs, all middle of the day, all a little overcast. I've landed some complete animals fishing big changers, but those 3 giant fish, and many in that 24 to 26 inch class, eating swim bugs, I'm having 10, 11, 9 inch fish eating the same flies, not having 9 inch fish eating these. So again, you're limiting your lower end and your ability to sometimes stay in the game when you're fishing giant stuff. And then the smaller you go, the more action you can get on that thing with the drunks and the swim bugs. I think that can be a selling point more often than it is something that'll put a fish off.
I have one. Sorry.
Go ahead, dude.
I'm like fairly new to fly fishing and really new to streamer fishing. And I'm like also fairly new to UVM, so I've been like trying to fish some water that I've never like gotten out on before. And you've kind of touched on like confidence flies and such, but if you have any like tips for like prospecting with streamers, like for trout,
Yep.
that would be great. Yeah, that's
Sure. Wade fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did this in a lot of different freestones in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia. I'll still do it from the boat every once in a while, but we just have so much river and you're in a boat that the being able to pick your targets makes more sense. But to approach a bank or a run, if you're, let's just say you're looking at the far bank, in an ideal world, you could fish the bank that you're walking before you walk all over it. I don't think that's a bad idea. There are too many times I have gotten a fly in close while walking over a big cut bank and see, a flash come out from under my feet, basically. So I think that as you're walking up, before you trample over, these fish, especially in the higher pressure, I'm thinking of Beaver Creek in Maryland and Mossy Creek, they can feel footsteps but there's also cows and stuff, so can't worry about it too much. So to fish what you're about to walk through is not a bad idea. With streamers, with sinking line, that can be kind of tough. So something I really like to do is to walk up. And if you are fishing both nymphs and streamers that day, nymph your way up and then swing your way back down. So you're working all the little pockets and, getting your drifts in, moving up the creek or river, and maybe do this, quarter mile run riffle pool at a time, where you go all the way up it and then switch to your streamer rod. You can leave your nymph rod up there. Good way to babysit yourself a little bit and get that streamer rod. And you can look up what swinging is, swinging for steelhead, but getting that cast, wading out as far as you can, getting that cast out to the other bank, and then working it back in across the river. That's actually how I developed the beginning stages of my confidence in the peanut envy, was fishing the gunpowder in Maryland, super pressured, pretty tough, and I started to get takes on that fly when nothing else was doing anything, and it was on that swing type of presentation. So I think I would do that in the Little J and a couple other Pennsylvania rivers too. So certainly recommend that.
But you're still working that fly when you swing it, right? You're not. Are you just letting it dead drift down?
No, I've used the term swing very inappropriately on my boat a handful of times with steelhead guys, and they're swinging flies. I'm saying, all right, dude, don't. We're going to call this the modified jig swing. So getting it out to the bank, and then I don't know how to, with limited arm space, you're getting out to the bank, you're mending that line up so that it can sink in a uniform way, and then this is the fly. As you're pulling it back, now I'm just going to let my line go. Dropping. Now I'm going to start stripping it in. Dropping here. Stripping it in. Dropping more. And then sometimes I was try to find the bottom. Let that heavier fly go out and sink all the way down. A lot of the times you're not finding the bottom in faster water. At that point, picking it up. So instead of covering water like this, coming across, you're doing this, and you're also working back and forth. So I'm not saying that's right, but for people who want to go out and fish streamers and target and hunt, swinging is just that's as close to nymphing as you can get with a streamer. You're sitting there hoping, and yes, there's if there's anyone that does that for steelhead, I wouldn't blame you for wanting to kill me. But because the patience, the methodology, yes, it's all there. I'm impatient. I have a short attention span, and I really like moving. I like working different flies. I like seeing what I can do and how. It's probably control issues is what it boils down to. So it's just more fun to move the fly and see if you can elicit and eat, as opposed to seeing if something eats. Which, yeah, same end, but the different means to me is those different means to the same end. That's why I like streamer fishing so much to begin with. Doesn't matter if it's a 10-inch trout. It's to do it in a way that you're controlling, and this is the fly that you chose, and you're working it the way that you're choosing to work it, and you tied that leader, and you're fishing a setup that you chose to fish, and you're giving it the strips and the kills that you're choosing to do, and you did it. That's the same reason I like dry fly fishing. They're so close to me. So yes, Lucas, it's not just swinging. I always have to asterisk, you can catch fish that way.
I'll say I've been getting into it a little bit. I have it.
Yeah.
It's fun. I like the technique for casting too, but I agree it's different means. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what I'm referring to is probably 2 or 3 feet of water moving pretty quickly, with a bank on the other side, maybe 6 rod lengths away, maybe a little longer. And it's, if proper, two-handing and swinging trout spay type deal, if that is the grad school PhD, this is some sort of sloppy, 101 type thing. But again, it's preferences and its styles. So yeah, Jonas, I would recommend that as a good way to search and to use flies that aren't comfortable with. So whatever we've talked about here, the Dungeon, the Peanut, one of Kelly's flies, the Zoo Cougar is great, Chuck Craft's Crelex, hell, like some unweighted black and purple woolly buggers, just some stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with. It can help to break things up when you're fishing new water, and it can also just get your mind thinking about how to approach that water if and when you see some eats.
Hey Ellis, I just I'm gonna have to head out here. I just gotta study for an exam I got tomorrow. But I just wanted to thank you so much for awesome. I just want to thank you so much for coming and talking to the club. Really appreciate what you had to say.
Yeah.
And I hope. Sorry, I muted myself. Y'all have a good rest of the meeting, and I'm gonna peace out. But thanks again, Ellis.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for the questions.
See you, Garrett. Yeah, I'm also probably gonna head out.
I think
but I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I think we can transition to wrapping this up.
Yeah, for sure.
Have
and
a good one.
Probably do this.
Thank you.
We'll have to set this up again because that was pretty good.
That sounds good to me.
I just finished my first attempt at ever tying a fly, and it's so
Yes.
busted. But I just left the tail long, but it's supposed to be a woolly bugger. But
Dude, you,
it's
I'm gonna, again, I need to be held accountable for some of these things I'm saying, like
yeah,
finding certain pictures or whatever. If you're able to just get my contact information and bother me to
Yeah.
find pictures of the first fly I tied,
yeah.
yours is better.
That's that's good to hear.
I tied marabou on a hook, and I
Yeah,
caught bass on it.
I'm probably gonna try this on bass because it can be a little bit slow on the uptake, but it's not too shabby. But yeah, I will.
man.
I'll shoot you
It'll fish.
I'll find you. I think I just followed you on Instagram, so I'll
Send me a message.
shoot you up there. Yeah, sounds good.
Fuck yeah.
Oh god, it's definitely gonna fall apart after any snag or eat. Hopefully eat, but we'll see.
Well, then you find out, and, you know,
You just tie another one.
time more.
Yep.
Yeah, Lucas, we can do it again, and either have the same degree of whatever, because I'm happy to talk about whatever, or we can talk about tying specifics, or
Yeah, I was gonna say we can dive into like some nerdy stuff about tying and fly design.
Yeah.
The stuff that makes us weird.
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
I'm actually I'm a pretty normal guy, but you, on the other hand, I get it, man.
When Ollie mentioned the whole popper thing, I remember the day that we went to the Little River, which is like the only official sort of tailwater, cold water area. In freaking like February, maybe. And I had just tied this sick, like white olive beast fly. It was probably like 10 inches. And it was a trout stream. And I was just like full on confidence, like swimming for the entire session almost.
And it's probably like what 20 feet across at the like widest point on the little.
Yeah, it's like a bigger stream, but yeah, still it was pretty entertaining. I entertained myself for sure.
It's always entertaining to see what Lucas throws in the water.
I have
Blame Ellis for that one.
I have a picture of a brown trout with it's a 23-inch brown trout with a 12-inch all black, could not be brighter. It's all black, but there's probably 30 pieces of lateral scale in it. It looks insane. That thing smashed it. 2 p.m.
Totally.
I made it for stripers fishing at night, but it was in the lower river on the Watauga, and said, why not?
Yep.
There's a river up here that Jonas, Lucas, and I have all started to fish more aggressively that has a mix of pike and brown trout in it. And hopefully one of these days we'll get a picture of a brown trout with something larger than 10 inches to make Lucas happy.
We've already
Garrett and I got pretty close last time we went. There were some goop heads that almost got smashed by some brown trout, but they were close. Not quite.
Sick. All right. Well, thank you again, Ellis, for the time, and we'll definitely set up another session for sure.
Cool. That sounds good, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm originally from like 45 minutes from the Holston. I hope to see you out there swimming some swim bugs sometime.
Yeah, man. Just let me know when you're back down here.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming and talking to us in person. It's really cool to hear from you. I've pretty much exclusively fished a swim bug for trout, like ever since Lucas handed me one and told me to fish it. So
yeah, I sent you a couple, I think.
Yeah, they've been working great for me.
It's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. I know that it's not necessarily for everyone, but for those who it is for, it's a lot of fun.
Oh,
I have yet to try one. I gotta try one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Before,
there.
before I head out, I have to tell the story about how I converted Ollie onto the swim bug. And it was a spring day, I think, or like sophomore year or something. It was like I think it was the first time Garrett ever came fishing with us too.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Exploring like this new to us creek. We had heard a ton about it, fished it one day in the fall when it was like poop brown. Came back the next day and I was like throwing the swim bug. Ollie was out of a rod because it was broken. And we were switching off, and Ollie's like, "Really, dude? You don't want to fish a mini dungeon? Like, this thing's got a fucking pink head and it's like 6 inches long. You really think a fish is gonna eat it?" And
Well, it was pretty gin clear water that day, and it was like
precisely
spring in Vermont where the water's frigid.
precisely.
I didn't have confidence, but
Because literally, as we were walking up on the hole, you told me that. I hand you the rod, one cast, a fish comes, and I called it. I was like, "Fish is gonna come back for it, Ollie. Put it back." Fish fucking came and slammed it right next to the fucking bank. It was sick.
It's awesome.
Oh, cool.
I'm glad to hear it.
It is
I mean, I took it off of a guy's line a couple weeks ago. Just I'm not going to sit there and argue or try to convince. It's but if we only had those circumstances where it's just like, I'm not tying anything else on you, throw it in and see what happens. It doesn't full stop. I'm trying to, I might be able to put some additional a sidecar attachment to the next meeting with some casting and on the water video.
Sweet.
So yes, more to come, and you and I will be in touch about dead deer.
We will be for sure. Got one sitting in the freezer. Hopefully more to come.
Cool. All right, bud, before we start talking about that.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
All right, Ellis, thank you.
Thanks, guys.